Senator Blackburn is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, thank you for being with us today. I want to return to the SVB issue and ask you, I haven't heard you say today, when were you first notified that there were problems with SVB, and when did you alert members of Congress? What was that time lag?
I believe that I first found out about the troubles at Silicon Valley Bank. I guess it was last Thursday.
Last Thursday. And then your notification of Congress came when?
The bank was put in.
Why don't you just put that in writing for me so I don't waste my time? I know Senator Langford asked you about the Deposit Insurance Fund and how that would affect our local banks. And there's a lot of concern over this. And I know you were uncertain about that. If you would run the numbers on that and let us know a ballpark of what you think this would cost if you end up insuring everybody's deposit. And then I have to ask you, being from Tennessee, you know, we have a long and storied history of opposing nationalizing the banking system. Do you see this as a step to nationalize the banking system?
Absolutely not. I see this as a step toward stemming contagion that could come from the failure of these banks that would place community banks across the country at great risk of runs as well that we want to.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me move to the Inflation Reduction Act and that implementation. I hear a lot about this from local mayors and our state agencies. There is a lot of money that can be doled out. Treasury and other agencies are going to be required to issue guidance. That hasn't come, and so there's a lot of confusion there. And I was looking at the structure, and I want to make certain that I'm viewing this right. You have the Deputy Secretary, the Office of IRA Implementation within Treasury, the Office of IRA Implementation in the IRS, and Danny Werfel, who is the new, recently confirmed IRS Commissioner. So with all of these bodies involved, who is actually in charge? Who's the final decision maker on the guidance and the timeline for releasing that guidance?
Well, our Office of Tax Policy drafts regulations, and we go through a regular rulemaking.
Then do you sign off on it? Are you the final say?
I do sign off on it. We confer with many people in the process of drafting that, and it will go through full comment and review before final.
Let me ask you something else, because the buck stops with you. You have really praised the IRA. I want to ask you one more thing about that, because your statements contradict themselves somewhat. You talk about the IRA as a way to really bring prosperity, to lower inflation, to lower the debt. So do you really believe that we can spend our way to lower inflation, to debt reduction, and to economic prosperity with the amount of debt?
I believe that this law promotes clean energy and R&D and investment in the United States.
That's not my question. Do you believe we can spend our way to lower inflation? And I'm going to move on, obviously.
I've never said any such. I've never said that I think that that's a way to lower inflation.
You have mentioned the IRS being able to answer more phone calls and respond more quickly because of the IRA funding. And I was looking at the IRS data, and it shows that the IRS actually answered 2.6 million fewer calls this March during the tax filing season. So, and I know Senator Thune asked you about this. If we could get some clarity from you and from your testimony about this. And what is the rate? How often are these calls answered and missed? What percentage of people at the IRS are still working remotely, and what is your timeline for bringing them all back?
What I can tell you is that the response rate to customer calls has been between 80 and 90% every week during this tax filing season, and that's a massive improvement. The IRS hired 5,000 new people to put into customer service, and that relied on funds from the IRA.
My time has expired, but the 8 Corners data call that the IRS gave in early March, the IRS says they've actually answered 2.6 million fewer calls this tax filing season.
There may have been fewer calls, but the rate of response was very much higher.
Thank you.
Hugely
Thank you,
higher.
Madam Secretary.
We do need to move on. Senator Menendez.